everyone. For this book review Wednesday, I thought it would be interesting to briefly address the Iliad by Homer. The interesting thing about the Iliad is that I don't think it's explored as much compared to the Odyssey. That is technically a follow-up to the Iliad. At least with most schools, I feel like they tend to focus more on the Odyssey and address sort of the themes and characters through that book, as opposed to focusing on the events and the characters in the Iliad. So I think it's only fair to sort of discuss the Iliad and its approach to Greek mythology and heroism in particular. Now, the interesting thing about the Iliad is how it approaches heroism. Heroism is a lot different within ancient Greek culture than it is with other cultures that have come a little bit later or a little bit before. For example, medieval history, chivalry was not just about going off and fighting and showing your strength and your determination and your bravery. It was also about treating people with respect and dignity and really protecting those who you cared about and who you found to be worthy of protection and display virtues towards those people. That's really what the philosophy of chivalry entails. Whereas Greek heroism is largely more based within hierarchy, with competition, with being a fighter, being a soldier, being that person who can also have leadership qualities. That's something that's, I think, very emphasized within Greek mythology, although I'm sure it's emphasized too within medieval history. I don't think it's as emphasized as it is here. But it really does have these sort of more traditional masculine traits, and it would make sense that that's why we have predominantly male characters throughout this story. So that's really an important thing to note with the way it approaches heroism, is that a lot of the time it's really about displaying acts of courage, showcasing your strength and your ability to fight. That's predominantly what heroism back then was really all about. And at the same time, not only do we have a different approach to heroism, there's also a different sort of approach to displaying the religious aspects of ancient Greece, because again, you did have gods. It was polytheistic. So not only do you have battles where there are people taking sides, humans taking these steps to really fight against each other, but you also have gods intervening and taking sides at the same time too. So it's really about that sense of competition and of trying to see who can be swayed to your side. And again, you'll see sort of the humans trying to please the gods, because again, they want as much god power as they can get, because that's sort of the mentality behind who would win a battle. If you had more power on your side, you were therefore the superior and the righteous winner. So again, it's all about winning, predominantly. And in order to understand the Iliad, let me sort of discuss what the Iliad is addressing plot-wise. Now, it's not really emphasized within the plot, but this is basically what sets up the entire plot of the Iliad. You have the Greeks, in particular, the area of Sparta, and no, this has nothing to do with Leonidas or the 300 Spartans. No, I think this actually comes a little bit earlier, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, history scholars, I can't exactly remember. But basically, what ends up happening is that you have sort of this, at first, sort of truce between the Trojans and the Greeks. And then one of the princes from Troy decides that he wants to be with he wants to be with the technically queen, I guess, of Sparta, who is already married off to the king of Sparta, Menelaus. And this prince named Paris decides to take her for his own. And as to whether or not she actually agrees to this, I think has been sort of debated. But regardless, they end up going off together back to Troy. And Menelaus, being the macho man Menelaus, is very furious about this. And he decides that there should be a war. And he drags his brother into it, Agamemnon. And Agamemnon sees this as an opportunity for gaining, again, more power. It's all about power. It's all about control. It's all about who's up on the other. That's all. Predominantly, that's really what this whole book is really trying to showcase. This emphasis of competition, of defeating your enemy. That's really what this book is about, predominantly. And sort of at the same time, getting more people to be on your side. In particular, getting more gods to kind of be on your side. Now, the way the gods take sides within the Iliad is sort of presented fairly logically, because you see, within polytheistic cultures, usually the gods represented different things. Like you would have like god of beauty or god of the ocean, things like that. Like Poseidon being the god of the ocean, of the water world. Aphrodite being the goddess of beauty. Athena, the goddess of war. Again, you had all these different elements associated with each god. And it makes sense as to who takes sides with whom. For example, Aphrodite takes the side of the Trojans, because Paris, being in love with the Queen of Sparta, Helen, is what resulted in them being together and having this war come up. And Aphrodite is the goddess of love, and so she sees Paris' act as an act of love, and therefore it would make sense that she would associate herself as being part of the Trojan side, of taking their stance and their understanding and saying, look, he loves her, there shouldn't be a dispute here, go home, Greeks, like you're complaining about nothing. Whereas the goddess of war, Athena, sides with the Greeks because she is the goddess of war. She is all about who's much more stronger, who's much more powerful. And since the Greeks technically have a lot more help, in regards to initiating the war, it only makes sense that Athena would side with them. So you do get and this is when you do get gods intervening. They actually make it seem like the gods are taking part in this war and really determining who is the ultimate winner of this dispute. And that's really at the forefront. Again, probably not as realistic, but at the same time, this was the mentality back then. It's usually the gods and goddesses really determined everything. They were the ones who set things in motion that ultimately resulted in either a positive or negative outcome for somebody. So they felt like that the gods and goddesses had a huge impact and influence on their lives. So it only, I think, makes sense that this would be a very important aspect to the story. But as far as plot-wise is concerned, it's usually focused in on the battles, on the disputes between various parties, and what ends up resulting from these disputes. So it is a very, I guess again, it's a more masculine culture. Like it's predominantly more based within hierarchy, within competition, with, I guess, rebellion to a certain extent to going against authority, because you'll see Achilles do this throughout the story. So I think that's something that the Greeks admired, was this idea of you don't belong somewhere per se, but you can achieve greater by climbing up the ladder. And that's kind of what Hercules does, because throughout the story he's not he's a leader, but he's not like the leader, because again he has to follow sort of Agamemnon's rule, and that leads to a lot of disputes. So this is really something that's really emphasized within this work, is this sense of trying to basically enhance not only a sense of competition between the Trojans and the Greeks, but between Greeks and Greeks together. Because again, predominantly this book focuses more on the Greeks and focuses on their problems and disputes, and not so much on the Trojan side. So I don't know if Homer was for the Greeks. I guess because he's Greek, that it would make sense. But that's kind of how the story presents itself. The interesting thing is that this book ends at a different point. It doesn't have really a solid conclusion, but it does really display some themes into how compromising and, again, putting in kind of, I guess, the more what we would consider traditional feminine traits in order to alleviate the chaos. Because again, they do emphasize that this war is Homer does emphasize how really chaotic this war is, and how enraging this war can be, especially when you have the two sides killing each other. So there is this aspect of compromise, of trying to solve a problem and maintain a level of peace, but at the same time re-emphasizing the importance of heroism, which is, again, all about that sense of hierarchy and that sense of competition and that sense of fighting for what you believe in. And this is clearly emphasized too when you see within their culture. Like, for example, during one of the Greek peoples, one of the characters that ends up dying, who is Greek, they do have this whole ceremony, funeral rites sort of ceremony for him, and they basically do it by having games. Like, they'll play games with one another, and they'll throw spears, and they'll do all of these activities that are essentially all about competition, and hence again, re-emphasizing that aspect. Although I think, even though ultimately that sense of hierarchy and being, the best and greatest, that's really emphasized as being important to their history, I think also this aspect of having a sense of truce and compromise is something that really sort of changes things, but at the same time, there is this still re-emphasis of bringing in that kind of a culture based within that. Even though, again, there needs to be these points of compromise and trying to work things through, there's also a sense of, again, that ultimately these things end up still resulting in a winner, because, again, we do see eventually that the Trojans end up losing. Spoilers, but that's not within the story, actually, because it ends a lot, actually a significant time before those events take place. But it does sort of, I think, end with this emphasis on trying to see things through compromise and through wisdom, rather than just pure competition and pure all-out war. And that's something I think Homer wanted to emphasize. And again, I think that's why he sort of ended the Iliad in this way, of having the sort of compromise take place within the end. And not really emphasize what really ended up happening. But again, it's just something that he didn't explore. But at the same time, there is this willingness to see things through despite what side of the aisle you're on. So that's, I think, really emphasized, with a sense of respect for one another that wasn't really present in the beginning, but later becomes present at the end. So there is this element, I think, within there that allows for Homer to really emphasize thematically the importance of this sense of wisdom, of talking, of working things through in a way that that is respectful to the other side. The side is still your enemy. That's still their mentality. That side is their enemy, but at the same time, they will show a sense of dignity and respect to that enemy when it calls for it, because you expect your enemy to do, I guess, the same thing. It's very complicated, but nonetheless, I think that's really the best way I can explain the Iliad in particular. But I think that's really all I can say, though, about this poem in particular. But again, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a great day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care.